G'day humans, Chris Stead from Fine here. We're talking NFT games and today the subject is Ubisoft. Now, if you've checked out any of my previous videos, you would have come across some Ubisoft ones, so it's no mystery where these guys stand on NFTs. When it comes to NFTs, the metaverse, blockchain, Play-Doh and gaming, everything that's kind of Web3, Ubisoft is all in. However, after quite a bit of negative press, how does the future looking for Ubisoft when it comes to all this metaverse and NFT stuff? That's what we're going to explore in this video. Now, this video is part of a series of videos I'm doing on the AAA video games publisher, developer, and console manufacturer scene, where I'm analyzing where every single one of them is on their stance with NFTs and the metaverse and everything that's happening with the Web3 movement. So make sure you check out the other videos. Also, make sure you check out the articles, which are linked in the description below, because those will be updated in real time as new events come out and are unfold over the months and years ahead. But right now, let's dive into Ubisoft. Now, for coming up on 3 decades, Ubisoft has been one of the biggest games publishers in the world, and it's always been quite famous for pushing back the boundaries of what we thought was possible with technology, and always kind of been there at the forefront of new console launches and new hardware launches to showcase what that hardware can do. But some of the big IP that you would know from Ubisoft include Prince of Persia, Rayman, Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon, Assassin's Creed, Just Dance, For Honor, Rabbids, The Settlers, Heroes of Might and Magic, Far Cry, Anno, Pets, Watch Dogs, The Crew, Trackmania. So no shortage of big names there, especially when you consider that some of those, like Assassin's Creed, have also moved into the movie space as well. And we are seeing a lot of more work happening between Ubisoft and the TV scene in the coming years ahead. So with a market cap of US 6.5 billion, Ubisoft is absolutely still a force in the video games industry. Ubisoft got into the blockchain scene very early on. Back in 2017, it created a new division called the Strategic Innovations Lab to experiment and work on things like blockchain technology. Now, its remit was staying at the forefront of trends and technology is crucial for the growth of games and the gaming industry as a whole. For Ubisoft, that means making use of the Strategic Innovation Lab to not only identify what the next big thing might be, but also how Ubisoft teams around the world can learn from these trends and implement key learnings into their games. One of these trends is blockchain. So you can see there an explicit mention of blockchain even as far back as 2017, but it wasn't just blockchain. Even back then, they were talking NFTs. In fact, at that time, the director of insights and trends at Ubisoft, Lidwin Sawyer, said, "When you put a one-of-a-kind digital asset on a blockchain, you can track exactly who owns it at a specific moment, and it's in a secure way. It's like if you have a Picasso, it's 100% unique, and if it's yours, it's yours. Thanks to the blockchain, you can now have the equivalent of digital Picassos with the advantage that they cannot be stolen from you." So that all happened in 2017. In 2018, we really started to see a big interest in blockchain as that first kind of large crypto event happened and Bitcoin flew towards the moon for the first time. Now, we see through 2018, Ubisoft become frequently more involved in blockchain conferences that were starting to emerge. In June 2018, the Rabbids brand did a crossover event with probably the biggest crypto game at the time, which was CryptoKitties. In September 2018, Ubisoft actually became a co-founder of the Blockchain Game Alliance. And then we saw just after that as well, it started to show off at various conferences a NFT game that it was building, or a blockchain game it was building, called Hashcraft. Now, that game never actually got public released. It was just a proof of concept by the Strategic Innovations Lab, but it was being shown off at these conferences, showing the types of things that developers like Ubisoft could bring to the blockchain space. We also know around this time that the blockchain ledger from the enterprise blockchain ledger that was being developed by Microsoft and being licensed out to companies, that Ubisoft did look at this time at potentially license that technology and using it to handle the Uplay backend for Ubisoft. This didn't eventuate, however. And this is kind of the development we see in 2018, where Ubisoft's really starting to position itself as a major player in the blockchain space. Now, after 2018, we did start to see a bit of a slide in the cryptocurrency market, and therefore the interest, or at least the conversation around blockchain, did start to dwindle a bit. So we didn't see too much going on from Ubisoft. In November 2019, we saw Ubisoft get involved with Ultra to release their UOS blockchain, where they were kind of hosting a node and just being part of getting that live. But then in March 2020, we heard from Nicolas Pouard for the first time, who is the Vice President of the Strategic Innovations Lab. And he started to express what would come to be known or come to be seen as where Ubisoft was intending to go with its activity in the blockchain space. Now, what he said in March 2020 was, over the long term, the free use of digital assets might create new forms of interactions between players, community, and game developers. To us at Ubisoft, we see it as a way to allow players to become stakeholders of the games they love at an unprecedented level. Blockchain is part of the technologies that are bringing new value propositions to users in what we call the Internet of Assets. In the same way that the web is the technology allowing Wikipedia, social media, and e-commerce, blockchain is a piece of a much larger picture that is currently being built by a number of actors and pioneering entrepreneurs. The main short-term challenge is simply to build good games for players and not only for speculators. It's important to remember that blockchain is still in its early days, and it might take a while before the benefits of the technology become tangible for our industry. It is difficult to foresee a specific tipping point for mainstream adoption, but I think things will evolve gradually. Now, just a few months later in June 2020, we had a very, very notable occasion for Ubisoft. It was the release of their very first ever NFT game, and it was called Rabbids Token. Now, it can only just be called a game, but it was effectively a collectible experience that was only ever referred to really as a proof of concept, where you could collect 55 different kind of Rabbids cards, and other players could find ways to steal those cards from you, and then you could use proof of your ownership to try and get those cards back, right? So a little back and forth like that, just kind of experimenting with the way that blockchain behavior can happen with transferring NFTs between different users in different parts of the world, that kind of thing, right? Now, the proceeds from this all went to UNICEF, so it was given as a charitable experiment. But that was the first time we saw Ubisoft actually publicly release a NFT game. Now, if we rewind time a bit back to 2017 when the Strategic Innovations Lab was formed, one of the things that also did around that time was something called the Entrepreneurs Lab. Now, this was a thing where they basically found various startups and I guess tech pioneers that were looking at interesting things and provided a opportunity for them to, I guess, be funded to a certain extent, but also grow through Ubisoft and try out their ideas. Now, a lot of these companies ended up being blockchain based startups, and now as of 2022 when I'm doing this video, it's up to its 7th season, so it's still going. Now, it was March 2021 where we saw something interesting happen there. Now, Ubisoft has taken to investing in a lot of these people that have come out of the a lot of these companies that have come out of the Entrepreneurs Lab, and one of those was a developer called Sorare. Now, they released a game called the One Shot League in March 2021, which was backed and funded to a certain extent by Ubisoft, which was a fantasy football league based on Belgian football, and was also, I guess you could say, the second NFT game that was released by Ubisoft, even though it's a Sorare game. As an investor in that developer, Ubisoft did play a part in getting that game out. So One Shot League in March 2021 was the second time we saw Ubisoft successfully deploy an NFT game into the public space. So around this time, Ethereum was the predominant blockchain being used to create a lot of these crypto games that were emerging at the time. But it had very high gas fees to do any of the transactions within it, and it was also very average for the environment as well. So in April 2021, Ubisoft invested in Tezos, which is an alternative blockchain to Ethereum, which has the lower gas fees and is better for the environment with a proof of stake system. Now, at the time, Nicolas Puard, the VP of Strategic Innovations Lab, said of that investment, "We're happy to be joining the Tezos ecosystem as a corporate backer. Ubisoft believes that blockchain has the potential to bring new possibilities to players and developers alike, and this new collaboration will allow us to pursue our innovation efforts in an ecosystem that aligns with our environmentally friendly approach thanks to its proof-of-stake consensus algorithm." Ubisoft would ultimately use Tezos to build its NFT platform Quartz, but I'll get onto that in a little bit. Now, through the rest of 2021, Ubisoft continued to make investments into the blockchain scene. Now, one of the more important of those happened in October 2021, where Ubisoft did invest in Animorca Brands. Now, Animorca Brands is one of the biggest players and one of the earliest OGs of the blockchain gaming space, working with a lot of play-to-earn NFTs and also acquiring key developers. Now, their biggest franchises includes the likes of Rev Motorsport, CryptoKitties, and the Sandbox. They've also bought developers like Eden Games, who you may know from the Test Drive Unlimited series, and also Blowfish Studios, a very successful indie here from Australia. Now, when talking to investors, Ubisoft's CEO, Yves Guillemot, explained the following. Blockchain will imply more to play to earn games that will enable more players to actually earn content, own content, and we think it's going to grow the industry quite a lot. We've been working with lots of small companies going on blockchain, and we're starting to have a good know-how on how it can impact the industry, and we want to be one of the key players here. But as it turned out, being one of the key players was seriously going to piss its fans off. Now, December 7, 2021 is a really huge day, I guess, when you're analysing the way that the AAA gaming scene has responded to the emergence of Web3 things like metaverse and blockchain and play to earn and NFTs. And that's because that's the day that Ubisoft launched its Ubisoft Quartz NFT platform and NFTs, which it called digits, to the public. Now, these are associated with a single game at the time called Ghost Recon Breakpoint. However, Ubisoft has continually, up to this date in 2022, iterated that more games and more NFTs will be coming to the platform. However, that said, nothing more has emerged on it since that initial launch in December. Now, at the time that it launched, Nicolas Pouard did say, "Our long-term efforts led us to understand how blockchain's decentralized approach could genuinely make play stakeholders of our games in a way that's also sustainable for our industry, placing back into their hands the value they generate through the time they spend, the items they buy, and the content they create online. Ubisoft Quartz is the first building block in our ambitious vision for developing a true metaverse, and it can't come to life without overcoming blockchain's early form limitations for gaming, including scalability and energy consumption." Now, that was the first time we really saw Ubisoft mention words like metaverse as something that they are trying to achieve. But all of that fanfare was going to go up in flames because gamers were really, really angry. And I guess it wasn't so much this solely. As you'll see from my other videos, there were lots of movements happening in the AAA video gaming space around blockchain at the time. But a developer of such note with such beloved hardcore gaming franchises, this was the tipping point where we really saw traditional games media and traditional gamers really start to vent their anger. And it got to a point where the staff within Ubisoft were getting so agitated about the feedback and the fan reaction that Yves Guillemot had to do an internal Q&A about a week later, around December 14, somewhere around that period as well, to kind of basically calm his staff down and say, no, this is our vision and this is what we are going to go forward with. Now, it was just before Christmas in 2021 where I reached out to Nicolas Pouard to do an interview with him. It was my thoughts that Ubisoft needed to be asked all of these questions that gamers were asking in all these forums and on all these articles that were going around the launch of Ubisoft Quartz. And in turn, Ubisoft needed a platform to be able to answer those questions. Now, I ended up publishing this interview in January 2022. And it blew up quite massively. Rather than kind of calming the, I guess, the noise, or at least giving Ubisoft that opportunity to say, hey, this is why we're doing this, in a way that gamers would understand, instead it just stoked the flames even more. And we saw a lot of traditional media pick up on this interview and really kind of, I guess, take things, I wouldn't say out of context, but certainly focus on only specific parts. And gamers then feasted on this, creating an even wider hatred, I guess, of the way that AAAs were starting to engage in the video gaming scene. Now, one quote in particular from that interview seemed to be a big focus point for a lot of the rage, and this is what it said. "It was a reaction we were expecting. We know it's not an easy concept to grasp, but Quartz is really just a first step that should lead to something bigger, something that will be more easily understood by our players. That's the way we think about it and why we will keep experimenting. We will keep releasing features and services around this first initiative. And our belief is that, piece by piece, the puzzle will be revealed and understood by our players. We hope they will be able to better understand the value we offer them." Now, you can read the full interview. I'll put the link in the description below for you to check out. But obviously one of the key things I think you need to remember here when analysing that quote is the quotes that have come before it. And if you go back to that March 2020 quote from Pouard, he expressed, I guess, a lot of the things back then that I guess manifested around the launch of Quartz. And so for him, it was a long multi-year process to get there, where he was expecting, I guess, this kind of reaction, and that I need to further educate. But certainly the internet wasn't interested in that at the time. And in his defense as the person who did the interview, I will say that English isn't his first language. And potentially he didn't talk to a lot of things he wanted to say as eloquently as someone who English is their first language may have. But still, he said what he said, and the reaction showed exactly how gamers were feeling about this whole entire thing. Now, the response to that interview was such that Ubisoft felt the need to issue yet another internal comms to its staff expressing its desire to continue on the blockchain NFT direction in February 2021. Now, the staff reaction to that within Ubisoft was not overly positive, or at least there was a section that were vocal about that, but the internal comms ended up getting leaked. And so we were able to see some of that frustration. Now, look, frustration internally between companies is far from uncommon, but I was unfortunate given the fire already around Ubisoft that these got leaked publicly, and it resulted in Ubisoft having to release a public statement surrounding, I guess, that controversy that was occurring. We take the encouragement as well as the concerns to heart, but sharing confidential information, including from internal forums, is a violation of our employment agreement and, more importantly, a violation of the trust that team members place in each other to be able to freely express themselves and have candid, productive discussions. And fair enough. For the rest of 2021, Ubisoft stayed relatively quiet publicly, but if you were watching the NFT gaming landscape, you would start to see the Ubisoft name just appearing more and more and more around games that were getting announced and emerged. Ubisoft was starting to get its fingers in a lot of pies within the emerging NFT developer space and the games that they were producing. Now, some of those notable games include Chronicles, Dogami, Frontier, Rebel Spots, Cross the Ages. Now, of those games, I have covered Dogami on the channel before, so go look at my videos. I've got an interview. I've also got a gameplay analysis for you there. But moving back to Ubisoft, the next kind of big milestone moment happened in February 2022. Now, at this point, we found out that Ubisoft had invested in Hedera, which is an alternative hash graph to what we've seen, I guess, with Tezos and Ethereum and Bitcoin. So this is a different way of looking at things. And by investing in this, we found out that Ubisoft basically has a foot in both camps, to whichever one may take hold, because it's got an investment in Tezos already. Now it's got an investment in Hedera as well. And as part of the Hedera Council Group, I think that's the correct name, I might be slightly wrong there, as well, kind of advising on the future of that hash graph. Now, at the time, the Strategic Innovation Lab, Didier Genevois, said of that investment, "At Ubisoft, we believe that distributed ledger technology holds a key to the future of gaming by opening new opportunities for players to become true stakeholders of our games. The Hedera network offers a promising take on this technology, notably through its scalability, energy efficiency, and innovative consensus mechanism. We look forward to exploring with the Hedera ecosystem through our participation in the Governing Council." A few months later, in April 2022, Ubisoft did confirm that it was not going to be making any more content or NFTs around the Ghost Recon Breakpoint experience, the one that launched with Quartz, if you recall, back in December 2021. However, it did say that it was still going to look at integrating NFTs into other games and onto the Quartz platform in the future. Now, big things are still going to happen for Ubisoft around blockchain and metaverse and Web3 in general through the rest of 2022. Now, I'm going to take you back to a quote right now from Nicolas Puard in my interview that I did back in January 2021 with him, because I guess what he's saying in his quote is about to manifest later in this year. I just can't talk about it right now, even though I know about it, because it's under embargo. But I will read you this quote because I think this is not just a play that Ubisoft is going to make, but it's also a play we're going to see from other AAA video game developers. And indeed, Square Enix is another one who has indicated that they are going to start looking at guilds as a form of user acquisition. Anyway, here is the quote. "When you talk about the DAO guys like Guild Games, they really see themselves as a new tool for user acquisition in games. Because if you build a good play to earn experience, these guilds will come to your game and they will boost up your ecosystem, and the net effect is that you will need to engage the whole economy and community. So yeah, it's no more just about the marketing expense of how you acquire new players, but it's how you build your game in a way that will attract the DAO guilds." What he's basically saying there is that at the moment, Ubisoft spends a chunk of money to acquire new users. So people who don't currently play Ubisoft games or aren't part of the Ubisoft ecosystem, just like any company really, they need to be marketed to and encouraged to come over and experience that, and that costs a lot of money. What he's saying here is that if you actually have these guilds which already have these huge player bases that aren't involved with your gaming community, if you can find some way to work with them or build a game that works for them or acquire them, then you can suddenly get this huge player base you don't currently have and move them into your game. And that could be a better way of spending to acquire new users. Now, as I'm sure has become clear through all of that, Ubisoft is all in on Web3 future, and notably the metaverse, play-to-earn, NFTs, and blockchain technology. The question is, how many bridges will it burn with its traditional fans in reaching that goal? Now, I should probably point out that also in that interview from January 2021, and I do encourage you to read it, the whole interview, which I will link down below in the description, that Ubisoft did flag that it would think that new IPs would be the best way to go in exploring that future. So that's something that I guess traditional gamers may be able to latch onto and take some heart from, even though that first experiment did happen with the major brand of a Tom Clancy Ghost Recon title. Anyway, those are everything. Well, that brings you completely up to date with everything to do with Ubisoft and its blockchain investment as of July 2022. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Chris Stead from Fine, and make sure you check out my other videos. Until next time, happy gaming.